Michelle Niffen works for Walt Disney Imagineering, and she's an Auburn University graduate. Michelle's here to share her experience on being a professional engineer. Michelle, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
All right, you ready?
I am.
Cool.
Do it.
Awesome.
I would love to know, regardless of career or degree, what made you choose this field? And also, as a kid, what were you building, fixing, or tinkering with?
So, this kind of breaks down into three questions for me.
Okay.
Because obviously part of it is, being the technical engineer, part of it is being in the entertainment industry, and then the third part, is I was not building anything as a kid. I was playing Pokemon. I did a lot of that, to be honest. But, so kind of the first thing is what got me into being an electrical engineering. And, kind of the breakdown of that too is, and especially for any first year engineers that are watching this, I think we come into engineering with a lot of different things in our mind of, what is an engineer? And then the breakdown of, what does an electrical engineer do? What does the mechanical engineer do? What do all these different engineers do? And then when you hone in on, what does an electrical engineer do? Then you get all these divisions of, are you a high voltage engineer? Are you a fabrication engineer? Are you in academia? Are you doing research on electromagnetics and quantum computing? Are you, then my role, a low voltage engineer who's, kind of more on the computer side, dealing with networking and system architecture. And so, I think the thing, how I found my path, down all those little things, trickling into engineering. I first realized that I wanted to be in electrical when I, in a sense, failed at, this sense of, I knew that I wasn't going to be a good aerospace engineer because, oh my gosh, physics 1 and 2 kicked my butt. I mean, you're talking to like a girl who had never made a B in her life, and I was sitting in physics 1 and 2 making like 20s and 30s on tests, and it was, I made it out. And if you're watching this, you will make it out too. But, so that kind of taught me like, okay, scratch that off the list, but what's next? So I started looking at electrical and mechanical, and I was really fighting between those two because I really like the design aspects of both of those. So actually I remember Dr. Roppel was the first person I talked to when I came into the department, and of course, sweet Dr. Roppel is walking me through and showing me these possibilities of, you can work with robotics. Look at our makers lab. Look at these things that you can create. And so when I heard that, when it really clicked with me of, wow, electrical engineering is the closest you can come to engineering and magic. I was like, yeah, sign me up for this. Like, I'm going to be an electrical engineer. And then going through that coursework, and of course, part of my story is going through Disney and seeing, what are electrical engineers doing, in this company that I'm kind of interested in. I started to whittle down and figure out, like, I really like electrical engineering, but with a twinge of, I like computer engineering as well. And so I was taking electives that were more programming focused, and I really enjoyed that. And then once you graduate, you kind of get thrown into the big world of what you do. And for me, it was Disney wasn't hiring at the time, so I went in as a consultant, and I loved doing that for the time being. And so as you kind of find your niche in electrical engineering or whatever other engineering or not engineering, it's definitely kind of a fun process to look back on. And it seems very linear when people look back on it, but in all honesty, it's just picking and choosing what's interesting. What do you see yourself in? What is something that actually makes you excited to go into class? Because I can tell you, if electromagnetics weren't fascinating to me, I would not have made it through that class. And so that's, kind of the electrical engineering careers. There's a lot of, I love that it was something that allowed me to create and explore, and, it was something that was like, all right, you can get the basic tools, and then those basic tools allow you to create whatever you want. You learn the rules of the game, and then you can, kind of craft it to whatever ideas pop into your mind. So that really excited me. And then the entertainment industry. It's when you think about an engineer, like I tell people this story all the time. Like when I was growing up, the only connection that I had to what an engineer was from watching Star Trek. It was like, all right, the engineer is the one who works on the warp drive. They do cool things, But I had no idea. And so, once I started going this engineering route, taking this weird little path with Disney and, entering the college program, I had no idea that Disney had engineers. And then, going to the parks and realizing like, okay, there's some engineers here, what do they do? And, networking, reaching out to people. It was a lot of stepping outside of my comfort zone. And I think in a weird way, a lot of what I liked about the themed entertainment industry is it is very small and it's fairly close-knit. And so, it is all very relational. I think a lot of engineering firms don't quite have that piece. I think a lot of, there are definitely engineering firms that allow you, if it's your niche, if it's your forte, to let you have your office and you can be there all day, not talk to people. For some people, that is the dream. That's awesome. For me, I would wither like a little flower in that environment. So I love the aspect of, everyone in the themed entertainment industry was someone who, loved what they did, in engineering. And then, we're curious with Disney, we're curious in the parks. And it was networking. It was, hey, can I chat with you for 15 minutes? Hey, can I get you coffee on your lunch break? Can I, pick your brain? Can I, hear your story? And a lot of the networking aspect for me was, I did not go in there. I had set questions. I oftentimes had research questions, but, I always try to go in there and truly just say, hey, what is your story? What did you do? How did you get to where you are? And then, what advice do you have for engineering students? And what I found was there are so many people in this industry, and I have to imagine every industry has these people that they didn't get where they were without, other people kind of reaching out a hand to them and saying, there's someone who did this for me, and you're going to pass it on, and you're going to do it for someone else. And so that is something that really initially drew me to the entertainment industry. Was there was a lot of people who had, my same happy resting face personality that, got this weird kick out of creating, robotic mice in the parks. That kind of had this Disney Kool-Aid about them. And so that was just really cool to finally find, this group of, hey, there's nerds that also are creative, that like to, create little like hobby Arduinos in their spare time. There's other people that are like me. And so, as far as there's so many engineering jobs out there, there's so many industries, and again, the great part of internships is you can pick and choose. There are people in which Disney engineering would drive them crazy, but it was a great fit there. And then, while I didn't tinker with anything as a child, there were always things that I was exploring, like I mentioned. If there was something that I was truly terrible at, like, writing, like, oh my gosh, I used to be terrible at tennis, and then I made it my goal to get better, and I wound up playing tennis for a lot of high school. And I think it's so funny to me because growing up, I wanted to be an animator. I love doodling, I love drawing, I still do to this day. But looking back, there's so many moments that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I should have been an engineer. I always loved trying to fix these problems. If it was, relational, like I was always the problem fixer in the group of friends. I was always, trying to figure out, what am I bad at and how can I make that better? So I was not the traditional, and I still to this day, I feel like I'm too scared to take things apart because, while now I have the confidence I can put it back together, I'm just like, I don't think I'm going to do that. But, there was always, so many instances looking back on now, I'm like, okay, I was a little engineer.
Michelle, I have to say, I love listening to the passion in your voice about your job and your career. I mean, if I wasn't already an engineering major, just listening to your enthusiasm would make me want to become an engineer. Thank you so much for sharing this. Has anyone ever asked you to do a job or a task and you replied in a thick Scottish accent?
I love the reference. Oh my gosh, I don't think I could possibly create a Scotty accent.
So you've never been like, it's like, I don't know, Captain.
But the accents are not my strongest suit.
What area of engineering are you most passionate about? And why?
I think right now, and I think this is an answer that probably changes for engineers over time because, the great thing about our modern world and about the state of technology right now is that there's things that are evolving constantly. And so I think kind of the area that I find myself most fascinated in right now is, my role is more generally, it's specialized in Disney in the sense that I'm working as a low voltage designer for the facilities as well as, an integrator for a lot of our show systems and ride systems that need to, all talk with each other within an attraction or a resort or whatever it may be. And so I think the really cool and fun thing that really excites me about my job right now is there's a lot of electrical engineers who kind of, they aren't crazy about programming. They aren't crazy about the coding world, and that is something I love. And so what I found right now is that there's a lot of areas that are, there's a lot of really mundane tasks that, that are being done in Excel, as part of being, gosh, we may need to redo this. Because, a large segment of my role is being a project manager for this very technical subset of devices. And so there's a lot of tasks that, are mundane, that are done through Excel. And it's really fun for me to be able to, find those things that are taking, 6, 8 hours, even days, and, write a little Python script that just kind of automates everything. Magic. So what really excites me right now is there's a lot of opportunities for automation within this very niche segment of, electrical low voltage construction. So that really excites me. But then, more on a hobby level and more in just the world of technology. I think the things that really excite me right now are things like Tesla, are innovations that are happening in, clean energy, that are happening in batteries, that are happening in, technology that can move our society into, the kind of future Jetsons world that, I like to think about. And so I think kind of in a broad sense, there's things within my job and my day-to-day that excite me, and it's, something that I love getting up and going to work for. But then, there's also engineering concepts that are way outside of my, expertise, outside of my knowledge base that I just think are really cool.
Michelle, put on your thinking cap. It's challenge question time. If a train leaves a station going 60 miles per hour, and 1 hour later, train B leaves the station going 85 miles per hour, how long before the hobo on train B gets his moonshine back from the hobo on train A?
Very interesting. I think this hobo has a lot of time on his hands and a lot of moonshine.
Okay.
I think it's dependent on the quality and the potency of this moonshine.
This, of course, was a trick question. The answer is never. The hobo on train A already drank all the moonshine, so the hobo on train B will never get it back. And also, if they're on the same track, one train can't pass the other one.
That's fair.
What would you like to be doing in 5 years?
It's another great question. And it's one that I try to ask myself often in a lot of different realms of life. I really enjoy what I've been doing with my current team. And I love, kind of this little niche technology group that I found myself in. So if I could wave a magic wand, I would love to see myself, kind of staying with this group and kind of growing my expertise within resort-wide systems at Imagineering. But then I think also this last year has really shaken up a lot of things for me. And, I never, I used to look at people who graduated around the time of the 2008 economic crisis and think like, wow, I am so glad I'm not, in that boat. And then, of course, a year after I get out of college and I'm working, we go through this pandemic that, just really killed the entertainment industry. And, it was very, very hard to watch. Just this company that I love get hurt so much. And, there was a lot that I think I kind of learned through that, and having to face, this thing that my dad used to always tell me of, of course you're going to find companies and teams and people that you love. That is, that's what a career is all about. That is the right way to go about it. But also it's having to realize that you are so much more outside of being with a company. And so when I think about, where I want to be in 5 years, there's a general target. There's, I love the path that I'm on. I also know that, there could be a branch in that path that, who knows what life is going to throw. It could be a pandemic, it could be an economic crisis. There's so many things that are just, outside of the realm of control. So, there's things that I could tell you, about specific goals, about, the exact position I would be in if I could, wave that magic wand, and. But then I think there's also a lot of just knowing the things that are important to me is that in 5 years, I'm going to be with a team that values me, that values mentorship, that values, communication and respect in the workplace. I want to be sure that I'm giving back to students, that I'm able to share things that I wish I had heard, things like this. There's things that I want to be doing for the community. There's, the person that I want to be in 5 years is so much more than an engineer. It's, how do we better our communities? How do we better our inner circles? How do we better people that we work with every day? Something I try to, in the wee hours in the morning as I'm gaining my social skills, as I drink my coffee, the thing that I like to, run through as a mental exercise is kind of reminding myself of the actions that I do today are either going to contribute or they're going to take away from a culture of respect. And for anyone who works around the construction industry, it's kind of a rough and tumble, people like to be superior, people like to show off, their great knowledge and whatnot. And so luckily I've had some tremendous mentors who've taught me, how do you go about having a character that, finding that line to walk of, you're able to be respectful. You're able to be professional even when, emotions are flaring. And, just every day realizing you have your engineering toolbox and your job and, your tasks that you're going to get done in the day. And you also have your relationships. You have, your perceptions. You have people that, whether you realize it or not, you are having a huge impact on. So in 5 years, I hope, if I could impact one person, if I can encourage one student, if I can, be helpful to one coworker, those are my more important goals.
That's cool.
When you're worn out, what do you do to continue to be self-motivated?
The picture that we all have in our minds of, like, the brilliant engineer, like the brilliant student is the one that, just works and doesn't sleep and, is, getting, 2 hours of sleep because they're trying to do all this homework. And, there's times that happens. And, so for physical fatigue, it's having to realize that school is important. And, those relationships that you form, there's a balance that you need to strike, that you are going to have to make tough decisions of, there's going to be times that you can't hang out with friends, or, you're going to have to make choices that affect, if you choose to do your homework, you may, there's relationships that may suffer. If you choose to go to a party, you may not do so well on that exam. But definitely, as far as combating physical fatigue through school, through an engineering career, you have to put yourself first. You have to know that you're not going to be at your best if you aren't sleeping preferably 8 or more hours, if you aren't, doing something to exercise, something to get out in the daylight and get some vitamin D. If you aren't eating right, if you aren't putting some fruits and vegetables into your body instead of Cheetos. And so physical fatigue, you have to put yourself first. You have to make wise decisions. And then mental fatigue, gosh, I feel like that defines college in so many ways. They're throwing so much information at you, and you just feel like your mind is going to swell. And so being sure to take those breaks, it does tie back to your physical well-being, being able to take it in chunks, get organized, create a list, create, here's how many hours I have in a day, and people that have different productivity levels, I need some time for myself to relax if I'm going to be able to do 4 hours of work, So, organizing however that seems best, that is the best way that I combat mental fatigue. And, realizing that for me, there need to be breaks in there, and I need to figure out how to manage that so that I get work or homework or exams done without having other things in my life that are important to me suffer. And then I think the last thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, and that I think affects people in various degrees, is there's emotional fatigue. We all have these relations that are going on in our lives, and we can't control sometimes family situations. We can't control sometimes when we have this big exam to study for, and a friend really needs your help. And so I think especially through Auburn, being able to gauge how exhausted am I? Am I do I not feel like I have the capacity, to give more of myself than I have to offer, when it comes to being with friends, when it comes to, whatever that looks like. And, I will say this so many times, but talk to counselors. There is so much help, and there's so many resources that are available at Auburn. And, I think a lot of times we like to look at it as a taboo, but gosh, I mean, I would venture to say that, the majority of our population at Auburn struggles with anxiety, depression, and that's something that I went through during my time at Auburn. And you have to seek help, and you have to know that it's okay, and that, that it's not something that's wrong with you. It's, we all have different levels of what we can, bear, and it's not ours to bear all on our own. And all of that, whatever type of fatigue you're facing, just know your job is to take care of you, and your job is to put yourself first. And, then from that, once you're rested, once you're, you feel like you have your strength back, then, school will come. Talk to professors. There's people there that understand and, employ you through fatigue in whatever capacity.
Michelle, I cannot thank you enough for saying what you said about counseling, because there's so many times I think as engineering students we just have so much on us, and we just feel like we gotta just keep going, and that either we don't have time to get some help, or asking for help is a sign of weakness, and that's just so not true. Just asking for help or talking to someone can make a world of difference in our own mentality and get us some help and help us to keep going. So thank you for saying what you said about counseling. Do you prefer to work alone, on a team, and why?
That's another one that I think, it varies in a sense. I'm a very relational person, and something I love about my job is I love working with various teams. I'm an engineer that, in some capacities I work as a project manager, and then in some capacities I work as a designer, and then in other capacities I work as a translator, for, working with teams that are very creative and have no engineering background whatsoever, and having to kind of explain things in a sense of all right, here's what's going on, but like at a much smaller level than I might say to someone who is another engineer who may be 20 years my senior and having to explain things up in that sense. So yeah. Shoot, this must be me getting tired. What was the original question?
Do you prefer to work alone or on a team, and why?
All right, yes. That is the, I love the aspect of the job of, I love working with people. I love working with people that have no clue about engineering. I love working with people who, you can talk technical things to and that I can learn from. But I think it's also human. There's a part of me that, like, I have a deadline, I have a drawing to get out. It is really nice to kind of, put in my headphones, kind of close myself in my desk, not look at emails or, and a lot of times it's me blocking out time on my calendar showing that I'm busy because, there's certain tasks that, I love working on my own, but, with the asterisk of there's never, especially now as a new engineer, there's very few tasks that I'm purely doing on my own where I'm not, talking to a mentor for help, that I'm not getting input from another person. And so I think successful engineers, and, I can only speak from my experience, I think there's a lot of great careers where, you work more with teams or that you rarely interface with people whatsoever. But I love the mixture of both. I love primarily working with people, but also, of course, it's nice to be productive, to knock things out.
Thank you very much for your time. Again, I cannot say it enough. I love your passion, your enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is very infectious. Like I said, if I wasn't already in engineering, it made me want to be in engineering.
Well,
and
I
thank
have a lot
you
of fun.
so much.
You have great questions, and
Good.
gosh,
Yeah.
it was great just being able to
Yeah.
talk to you.
We only made it through about half the questions, so if you ever want to play Talk Show again, anytime, and kind of go over these others, I would love to set up a time. But of course, the fact that you sacrificed one of your nights and your times to make this happen, I really appreciate it. I would love to hear your input. I love picking your brain in a totally non-zombie way. And I've had a lot of fun. And thank you again for your time. And also, Dr. Roppel, thank you so much for your time and your recording this.
Thanks, that's you. Take care.